Good evening, everyone, or good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. My name is Bill Nguyen, and I am the director of Nguyen Art Foundation. On behalf of the foundation, it is my pleasure to welcome you all to an exercise in mourning, part two. This is the final segment of our two-part event in association with the exhibition In Absence Presence, which is currently on view at Nguyen Art Foundation and will be closing soon later this month. This online panel brings together a distinguished group of speakers. We have Guy Cools, a renowned dance dramaturg and author of seminal book Performing Mourning, Laments in Contemporary Art, which has basically set the inspirational foundation for myself within the curation of the exhibition In Absence Presence. We also have participating artist Lena Bui from Vietnam and two invited guest artists, Eliana Otta from Peru and Sarah Boutin from Canada. Now, although from vastly different contexts and with equally different interests, the artistic practices of these three artists offer new perspectives for navigating loss and remembrance while cultivating resilience in the face of present and future crisis, both on a human and ecological level. Tonight's session will begin with three short presentations. Eliana will start, followed by Sarah, and then Lena. After their presentations, we will open the floor for a joint discussion where you, our dear participants, are warmly invited to participate. During the Q&A, please feel free to type your questions in the chat function, and we will read them aloud for the panelists to respond. I would like to now hand the mic over to my dear collaborator, Guy Cools, who will set the stage for our conversation. Guy, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bill, for the introduction and also for the invitation to co-curate this event with you. When Bill reached out to me to do an event together, it was very clear for me that I wanted to have different artists from different places in the world dialogue with each other. Bill sent me all the information about the artists involved in the exhibition in Vietnam, and looking at their work, I saw both of Eliana and Sarah. As I explained in the previous event, writing for me is very much a dialogical practice. So while I was writing the book, I tried to be in dialogue with most of the artists I'm writing about in this book. And so also after the book was published, this dialogue went on, and artists a little bit all over the world, like Bill himself, contacted me. And so I met Eliana while I was still living in Vienna when she was doing her PhD. And Sarah, I met her here since I moved here 2 years ago in Montreal. And I have an ongoing dialogue, and the round table also offers a moment to deepen this dialogue, as we have been having already conversations to prepare it and also exchanging material. So this is the one thing. And the second thing is that I do believe that every artist has a unique voice and a unique practice. But I think what connects the artists today is in the subject of mourning being a source for artistic practice, is also in the four themes. I think that they will address it more concretely with the examples of their practice, but I think that we've got to frame this. First one is that in all these traditional rituals related to mourning, like the lamentations, there's always a strong link between the individual experience and the collective experience. So these rituals are there to gather community in support so that the individual experience becomes collective. The second thing, which I think I love in the work of the three artists, is that since this process of mourning has quite complex, thing, what I've seen in the work of three artists is that they need different media and all develop an interdisciplinary practice to address these complexities. Third element is that before you create, there has to be a receptive practice. And in all three, I think this act of listening as a starting point for a creative practice is also very strong. And the last thing is that in the world we live today, what is happening, climate change and other major crises, we can't exclude the human anymore from the non-human. So in all three practices, I think we'll also see strong connections between human and non-human, mourning for human and non-human practice. That's how I want to introduce it. And I'm happy to pass it on to Eliana, or if Bill wants to further introduce, then Eliana can do so.
Eliana, the floor is yours now, please.
Hello, thank you, Bill, thank you, Guy, and Sarah and Lena for being here, and of course, all the participants of this talk. I would love to see your faces, but it's great to know that you are there listening to us. So I also look forward to your questions and comments. Thank you for the nice introductions. Also, I feel very identified with what you are sharing, both of you. And so I wanted to share now my screen to talk about some dimension of my work that I have been focused on the last years. So now, is it working? Because I can't see myself.
Yes, it is working.
Okay, thank you. So I wanted to start by doing a little introduction to how I started to engage myself with the issue of mourning. So I am originally from Peru, and in the decades when I was growing up there, from the early 80s until the early 2000s, Peru lived what we could summarize as a war. The technical name is something like domestic armed conflict or internal armed conflict. There was a struggle, a fight between two subversive groups, the Shining Path, a Movimiento Revolucionario Tupac Amaru, and the state. And these subversive groups did, in some cases, terrorist actions. And the state replied with human rights violations. And from that period, there are still 15,000 disappeared people, and around 70,000 people were dead or killed by these different fractions. And there were also a lot of cases of sexual violence, mostly committed by the armed forces, and also the state had like a parallel intelligence operating. So it was a period that left a big trauma in the country, and also a big, let's say, unresolved process of mourning. And from 2014 until 2016, I was the curator, the coordinator of the curatorial team that made the permanent exhibition of a museum that was dedicated to talk about this story of war. And this is a museum that is still there in Lima with this permanent exhibition. If somebody has a chance to ever go there, you can visit it. And this image corresponds to installation that we made with stories from people that was affected by violence in different ways. And with all these people, we discussed largely about how to work with their testimonies. And the idea was that we wanted to explain violence as something that happened in a life that had a before and after, so that their life was not reduced to this moment of violence, and they were not reduced to a condition of victimhood, but that they were also represented as agents fighting for justice and reparation. So this was a very intense and interesting experience for me, working especially with testimonies. I was next to the historian Ponciano del Pino, in charge of doing these interviews, to conceptualize them and also to work on the videos that we showed there. And from those conversations, it was clear to me that a lot of people that experienced violence in that period were after that many times considering suicide as a possibility, and that most people that experienced violence didn't find solidarity in society at large, and there were not public or collective spaces to mourn. So in this case, somehow for me, a conclusion after this work was that it was needed for society to learn to listen to painful stories, and also to be able to open up, to receive and share stories of loss, and to create spaces to collectively and publicly mourn. So I was wondering how could art help in that work. So after that, I applied for a residency in Athens, in Greece, and lived there for 9 months. And after that experience, because Greece was still very affected by the crisis, and I had a lot of conversations with people that were declaring themselves as depressed, but always in a collective way, so that they were saying that my friends are depressed, the society is depressed, the city is depressed. So people were always using this diagnosis in a collective way. And I was interested in explore what could be collective objects of loss in a situation of crisis, and how could art be a vehicle to somehow mourn those losses. So in that case, I was interested not only in human losses, but to think about loss in a more abstract sense, like to consider, by example, a dream, an idea of future, a political project, but also to think about the material effects of the crisis, and also ecological crisis, like forests that disappear after fires, which is something very common in Greece and has been going on more often because of climate change. So with these ideas in mind, I started to develop a PhD project that I did at the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna. And I worked about this for 4 years, trying to do collective work in Athens, mostly with artists and activists that were also interested in discussing the connections between depression and capitalism, and the importance of socializing experiences of loss and pain that many times are kept to the private realm, and that are considered as things that block the possibility to progress or to improve. So I was trying to do collective work, but of course the pandemic made it very difficult. But something interesting that happened in that period is that I started to belong to a collective that was formed with some friends, female friends that are artists and therapists, that now we have this collective called Mujeres. And I invited them to try to create exercises of mourning in relation to the lost forests of the last years. So this image corresponds to a ritual that we made in an island called Evia, where we spent a weekend every day going to these forests and trying to learn how to engage with the trees and with the disappeared forms of life that used to inhabit this land. At the same time, I was following at the distance the increasing killing of leaders of indigenous communities in Peru, mostly in the Amazon. On one hand, there were a lot of people dying because of COVID, especially in these communities where help was coming always late and with poor translation, and when people have sometimes other type of immune systems because of the ways of living. And many leaders and important teachers of the Amazon died because of COVID, and at the same time, their killings increased. So because I was following this at the distance and I noticed that there was not enough information in the press about this, I started to find ways to address this. So these images are from a performance I did in Peru, responding to this situation. And this was something that made me try to think about connecting the experience in Greece and the experiences in Peru to arrive to this concept that I call fertilizing mourning. So this concept is somehow creating bridges between different cultures and epistemologies, for example, connecting theory like the ideas of Judith Butler, the Greek anthropologist Athina Athanasiou, or Gloria Anzaldúa, Jean Rey, Stefano Varese, or the Peruvian writer Jose Maria Arguedas, but it's a concept that is mostly based in the indigenous practice of Llana Alpa, which is a traditional way of regenerating the soil in the Amazon. That is a practice that was merging spiritual and agricultural actions and knowledge to make the soil more fertile by burying the bodies of the people that died next to what we call compost today, organic debris and excrement and urine, but also pieces of broken ceramics that people were making when they were alive. So they would put all together and burn it under conditions of reduced oxygen so that the CO2 would go to the soil instead of to the atmosphere. They would cover everything before burning it. So it produces this very black soil that we see there, and that gives the name to this practice, Llana Alpa, which means black soil in Quechua, or terra preta in Portuguese. So this has been found in the whole territory of the Amazon with proofs that this is a very ancient technique. And I was trying to think how could we be inspired by this practice to understand mourning as something that can regenerate life and that is learning from nature and also from the humans that have lived in connection to nature for the long time without distracting it, and always trying to offer to the soil as much as they take from it. So how can we think of a fertilizing mourning for the type of losses that we are experiencing nowadays in the context also, of course, of climate change, but of different wars and extinction processes that somehow overwhelm us. So with this in mind, I developed a project that I called a Virtual Sanctuary for Fertilizing Mourning. This is a project that was done with the support of a German institution called Driving the Human. And this allowed me to work 2 years dedicated to make different videos, texts, audio pieces, and workshops. And by example, this is a guided meditation about the killing of the indigenous leaders in the Amazon in connection to how also their ways of lives, environments, and territories are threatened, and also in the process of disappearing in many cases or of experiencing very violent transformations. So this is a guided meditation that I did in relation to traditional healing from Peru and the plants that are teachers there for expanding our understanding of what it means to live and to die. And so, as you can see in this map, the Amazon is a big part of the Peruvian territory, beyond of what normally is understood as Peru. So I wanted to highlight how we are all connected to this territory that is normally depicted as the lungs of the world, even though now it's under huge pressure and also suffering from extractivist activities and huge fires. So here are some images from the process of work in which I was visiting 4 communities: Nuevo Amanecer, Hawaii, Unipacuyacu, Sinchirroca, and Puerto Nuevo. And I was making videos in their territories using, as you can see here in my head, this 360 camera that allowed me to make videos that were 360 videos of the environment and of their way of living and everything that they wanted to share with me. So the idea was that here mourning was becoming a force, interdisciplinary activity that was connecting daily life activities like playing, like we see, for example, in this video, these children playing. So how life continues, but at the same time, remembering the losses and how these losses can't be understood as individuals losses, but how we can see them as part of a dense tissue that weaves life, especially when we are talking about communities where things are collectivized and shared, and the humans and live very complex relationships with the more than humans beings. So this is the first manifestation of the project in Berlin in 2023. As you can see, it also had a series of drawings that I was doing with portraits of the indigenous leaders, with leader offerings that I brought from the Amazon. And in this case, this was Silent Green, a place in Berlin that used to be a crematorium. So it has these niches that I was using in the walls to put the drawings inside of these holes. These are other images from a biennale in Porto, in Portugal, where I did a different installation where people could also watch the videos and manipulate them with tablets. This is another installation in Zgm in Germany, where the drawings were all put together, creating some sort of altar and offerings, and then also where the videos shown in a different type of screen. And this is another version of the project in which there is a sound piece that people could hear sitting in these big puffs where people, where we had these images of the communities. And in these sound pieces, one of the daughters of one assassinated leader is talking about her dreams and how she was dreaming about her father telling her that she should receive us, that some people were going to visit, and that she should teach us and share about the life in the community. So I was also interested in this space of socialization that dreams constitute as a possibility to continue conversations with the dead and expanding our understanding of how is their present once they are gone. So to finish with, this is the interface that welcomes you when you enter this website that is called lutoverde.com. So if you want to spend some time with the project and access the videos that I did, you can visit this website and explore some of the expressions of this concept that I call fertilizing mourning, but that is for me a concept in the make. It's an invitation to share with others ideas and to rehearse or sketch possible practices of fertilizing mourning. So it's not a closed idea, and this project doesn't mean that this is what I think this should be, but it's a process of constant creation and research and speculation of how we can create the practices that the world somehow needs from us to acknowledge what is being lost, and also for us to respond in a way that regenerates life and our place in it. So I will stop sharing now, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Eliana. That was so inspiring. I had actually spent hours flipping through the website, and there's so much materials there that I actually would urge everyone in this room to spend some time with. But for the next 15 minutes, I would like us to also spend time with Sarah. So Sarah, please, the mic is yours now. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. For us this morning, so I'm really happy to share my work with you. So just tell me if you see.
Yes,
are you
can see it.
Yeah, okay, perfect. So I wrote maybe everything I will say, because when I'm nervous and English is not my first language, but yeah. So this was something I wrote in my notebook. One morning I was putting a bandage on my wound, and I was wondering, are we right to try to band-aid grief? Isn't that the contrary of like, it's about uncovering rather than covering? So with this in mind, I have chosen to share my work as a reflection in the form of a journal and give you access to my work note instead of the final work, because it seems that one of the bad side of grief is that it builds wall all around the grieving person. And I want this wall to find a quality in them. So it seemed easy to ask the grieving person to share their retreat, to participate to the world as the event of death or loss have not been. But truly, I think there is a quality about those walls. It seems that for me, if those walls can be like home, if grief can be called a home, we can change the perspective we are relating to this state of the mind and body. So by definition, a home is a structure where we can be protect, and we can go and come back. So there is a sense of stability and permanence. Usually grief is seen as a temporary state, but and something you go through, but I want to settle into it. So my reflection on grief has begun with the death of my grandmother, who was assisted by medical aid in dying. The project I did at this moment, I was doing my master in visual art and literature, and I was working on the absence and the idea of all the memories we carry, but we really don't understand or know. Like all the stories, we don't have word to tell about it, but the body is keeping. And she had a really bad health condition at this moment, and the project just changed. So it was about how can I be with her. So it was in May 2022, and I had just this idea of I will buy a white canvas and go in her garden. So 3 days before she received the medical aid in dying, I just start self-portrait in her garden, self-portrait and some photography about the herbs, the flower, and the plantation in her garden. I wasn't really knowing that I wasn't trying to make a project. I was just doing something to keep my mind and body together and to be present, as the anticipation of death and grief was something that was keeping me only in my mind, and in I didn't have really access to emotion. So that's why I was just finding a way to be in contact with nature and to be in movement. So 3 days before my grandmother died, I bought this fabric, and I photographed me, but also like all what were blooming at that moment. It was a way to remember that when she was dying, there was also the lilac, the flower, the maple tree. So it was a kind of archive to make grief part of something else. So after my grandmother died, I took care of her garden, and I was doing self-portrait. So I did this project of self-portrait and of a bouquet for almost 1 year, till the house had been sold. So it was not really to make portrait of myself, but it was a way to see, like by images, how the body how grief affect the body, how the posture during like the year after my grandmother died was maybe stronger or weaker, or it was a way to engage like a dialogue. So those are some images. And then, so by the time I was doing this project, I met Jacqueline, which is a nun from a convent in Tibet. She lived 52 years in Japan, and I met her at the funeral. At the funeral, it's quite funny, like the story. I never wear black clothes because I just don't have it. So I was at the funeral and I was wearing white, and I was feeling quite alone because like all other people were wearing black shirt, and when Jacqueline arrived, I just found a friend because she was wearing like a nun outfit, and it's like white and beige. So I was like, okay, I need to talk to her. And so in September, after my grandmother died, I went to the convent because I was really lost. Like it have been maybe 3 to 4 months after my grandmother died, and I was looking to rest. But grief is something that it seems like something that you can just have less energy or be in a mood of like being taken care of. But usually for me it was something that was so stressful, so the body is always tense, and I was searching for a place to rest. So Sister Jacqueline just asked me if I want to come to the convent, and I spent 3 days with her. So this was like in parallel of my project in the garden with my grandmother. So when I went to the home, I was welcomed and received by the nun, and it made me realize how we need as a society to establish a space where we can be surrounded and be taken care of. So here are some pictures. And I was really impressed because mostly in their 80s, the nuns are helping one in each other, and they are really like grief and death is part of their daily life. They for example do commemorative ceremony. They are one with each other, side by side on the bed, almost every day, or right now, to be realist, maybe once a week there is one religious nun that is just dying. So I was doing this garden project in the garden of my grandmother, and we sold the house, and I was at the convent. So the garden of the convent became the garden of grief. So I moved the white canvas from family space to a more open space. And I did also picture over there, and grief was in the garden about mouse, about bird, and for example, the first picture in the top of the page, for me it's called pleurer, so it's crying. So with the canvas and the garden, it was a way to share emotion, but that are not just human related. So this is like a kind of story about the day I spent in the convent, the small thing I see, and the way like the sister are helping each other and just accepting this reality of death. This has been a photographic exhibition in Italy in September 2024, yeah. And this series of photographs, I was asking myself with all this reflection in the garden, what is nourishing in the grief? So to view grief as a home is like to kind of want to settle in, and it's rather than the idea of put it away. It's more about how can I make a space to remain all the memory of joy. So I wrote this when I did the exhibition in Italy this fall, in the church Santa Elisabetta. The holy water was empty. So I was like, it's not it's not fulfilling. But in front there was a garden, and there was some Spanish and pine nut, and there was some water running to make it grow. And I was like, okay, we don't need the water to be in the church. There is water in the garden. And I remember to call Jacqueline at that moment. And when I called her to thank her to give me the opportunity to present my work in Italy, to have been there for me, but also for the reflection I have on grief. She was in the middle of choosing the hymn she will, like the nun will be singing at her funeral. And we both laughed because we were like, okay, this is all what it's about. So what I have found with this project is that like, of course, religious women I met over there are 80. So there are maybe more in a way to, they have been trained all their life to arrive at this moment and to see grief and death as a mystical experience. But what I see also is that they are together. So I wonder what sorority, like what was the fact to be surrounded with people you know and you love, change the way you live grief, but also they have practice. Yeah, so they view death as a mystical experience and mourning as a manifestation of great love for what disappeared. So by making trace of their ritual that reflects care, protection, and gratitude, I'm looking for how we can enrich the serenity with which they face loss. So yeah, so it's a way to, yeah, they have practice. So as I was saying, they are maybe once a week they are doing a ceremony for funeral. And I understand that the more we are in contact with death, the more we can find some pattern and ritual, and how my body is gonna respond to this situation. So they have practice, and this practice is not making grief and death less important, but it made it part of everything else. So, for example, one sister is dying in a room, and in front of that room, they are cutting raspberry or strawberry for a pie, and you are aware that there is near death by your side, but also that you need to nourish life. You need to nourish the other people around. So this word is really about contemplation. This word is about loss. For example, in this image, there is like this empty space. It's an old room where at the convent there are really fewer than before, so there is empty room. But at the same time, I was really touched and moved by the fact that this sweet potato was growing maybe as the same like formal aspect as this empty room, and by putting it together, it was like there is joy in grief, and there is transformation made by grief. So that's why I always do, not always, but often do a series of photographs. It's more like there is a narrative purpose, but also I think what is the most important for me is between the images. It's like the light and the silence and space you can like absorb the work. And when I was in Italy, someone told me my work was about breathing, and I was really, really happy with this comment, because it was for me because breathing for me, it's about life, and it's about the moment there is no more breath, no more life, but also how can we inhabit the fact that we can still talk or pray or be in contact with what is lost through something that is not word. So through breath. So like the reflection I had with the nun was that we don't have practice in accompanying that. So I was in the garden, and first I was like picking mulberry, and I was hurting myself because there was always like strash in my hand because I was holding it too tight. And I was like, okay, if I need to know what part to preserve, what will be good for the plant and for me and for maybe the pie I will do after, I need to practice. And that's what the nun teach me. Practice loss to be able to lose, but with trust. So maybe that's the wish I do with my work, because of course we don't have a lot of occasion to practice the death experience or the grieving experience, but maybe art can be a way, in the fact that each time we are exposed to a story of grieving or to a story of loss, or it's a way to maybe find in ourselves how do I feel about it? Am I uncomfortable, and why? So maybe it can, as today, be a way to start conversation.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for inviting us into the intimate space of your diary pages. Listening to you is very much like walking beside you, on this personal journey that you went on. And I think this question of how to practice being in close proximity with grief, with loss, with death, is something that I would really love for us all to unpack later during the Q&A. But before that, we'll have the last presentation by Lena Bui. Lena, I am handing the mic over to you, and hopefully your internet is working okay.
Yes, thank you everyone for attending this talk, and pleased to share with you some of my thoughts. So I will start. Hopefully my internet will remain hold out until the end. So yeah, this talk is about mourning, but I've chosen to talk a little bit on a different angle of mourning, so on vitality and on living, I suppose. Let's see. Oops. So recently there are several spectacular yellow mushrooms popped up on my in my pot of water jasmine, and I was very excited to show it to my daughters, to my daughter. And it's commonly known as the flower pot parasol because it pops up in greenhouses all over the world. So aside from its tropic kind of climate preference, nobody really knows where this mushroom comes from. But anyways, I diverged. The next morning, the mushroom had melted to a pretty interesting shape, to my and my daughter's disappointment. Mushroom, they're very brief lifespans, and I'm putting this in quote. Highlights the passing of time. It just wilts so quickly. But what we often misunderstood as death is simply the fruiting bodies that up from the ground to spread spore and having done their job. So it's often that death is a necessity to make way for new life. And in mythology, in many cultures, the god of death is also the god of life and the god of sex. For example, in Asian voodoo god of death, the Baron Samedi, also the god of life, because he's in charge of who he admits to the underworld, the afterlife. And so this is a still from a 007 movie. He's made it to the popular culture as well. And more popular gods include like Egyptian Osiris and or the Greek goddess Persephone. And it's interesting because I see a lot of overlap in my talk and Eliana's and also Sarah's talk in this link with nature. I suppose these gods are often linked very closely to agriculture and also to the turning of seasons. So I like to incorporate this into my work when I can, because they are old and reflect a certain world or human aspirations. Provide framework for us to go through the various stages of life. And quoting Joseph Campbell's writing, I find deeply inspiring. The diction definition of a myth is stories about gods. And then if you ask what a god, it's a god is a personification of a motivating power or value system that functions in human life and in the universe. It's power of your own body and of nature. And the myths metaphorical of spiritual potentiality in human being, and this power that animates our life, animates the life of the world. So I'm very interested in this power that animates, because something I haven't really talked about is because for many years I had mild depression. And depression is not being sad. It's actually being unable to access life. It's a case of lacking vitality. And for me, actually, to mourn something is to want to hold on to it and to feel a deep sense of loss. It's gone. So in sense, to mourn deeply is actually to be keenly alive, whereas being depressed is to be sort of outside whatever is happening and unable to fully participate. So I was recently looking through my old photos, and I found the two shots of an exhibition by the Chinese artist Jiang Jing that I went to more than 10 years ago in Taipei. And the whole show was extremely theatrical, with the dramatic lighting, human-sized figures or larger than human-sized figures, mainly women together or apart, each deep in their own thoughts. And I was particularly moved by these works because women have always been quite central to my life as caregivers and role models. And again, I see a parallel with me and Eliana and Sarah's time in this relationship of women and women. And for me, it's also maybe because they're mysterious, being a direct doorway to life in a way. So we often appear in my work in one form or another, and I think the life force that I sometimes lack in myself, I find in other women. So my women artist friends are the ones that introduced me or guided me into motherhood. And when I feel weak, I go to visit my grandma, and she's getting older and more frail each year, but she still exudes a lot more life than I've ever had. And a few months ago, my English professor, who was also sort of my mom away from home when I was in college, passed away. She was a real force of life, and this loss, it felt very abstract and very unbelievable through the phone. And it was only when her husband sent me the recording of the memorial service where that I could cry, and it was a very beautiful service. She was a real force of life. More than 300 people flew in from all over the world in person to attend, and I thought, oh, thank God for rituals, because it's participating together that we find acceptance and courage to move on. And so mourning, it's a process that very personal but also collective, and being able to share our grief, we can find our way forward. And I'm not sure if art has a special power for mourning, but like any form meant for sharing, it has the power to connect. So last month, a month and a half ago, I was visiting a Thai village to the border of Laos, and they have this very beautiful, intricate embroideries, and the man in the shop pulled out this beautiful piece and told me that because I was an artist, he thought this would fit me very well, and I thought it was spectacular. So I bought it, and after returning home, I found out that it was a piece used to cover the coffin in a funeral. That was what they used. I'm pretty glad I didn't know this information when I was buying it, because superstition and this connotation of death would have prevented me from doing it. And so I told my husband this, and he deadpan, like just told me, oh, okay, I'll do it for you. I'll cover your casket with it. And I said, thanks. And then thought for a bit, and he asked, so do I have to bury it with you? And I said, probably. And then he said, oh, I can't do it. It's too beautiful. So I think it really is a very beautiful piece, full of life, of different animals, of people weaving, of people working the fields. It's a celebration of life, basically, and yes, people don't carry it. It's passed down as heirlooms. So I will end my talk with this recording I made in a Newar village on the outskirts of Kathmandu, Nepal, many years ago, and I didn't know what the content of the song was about until I had it translated, and I thought it was just beautiful. All right, that's kind of my talk. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lena. You said something, I think, towards the end of your presentation where you said, thank God for the existence of rituals, but I really think thank you to all of you as artists and as practitioners, as writers, as witnesses for having recorded and shared with us all of these beautiful, critical, reflective works. I think we are now going to open up the floor for everyone. We're going to have our joint discussion. But if you guys have any questions for any of the participants, any of the panelists, please feel free to use the chat function above your window, type in your questions, and then we'll read them aloud. So maybe Guy, if you have any remarks you would like to share with the room, then maybe we could start with you.
In my introduction, I said I tried to kind of make some parallel between how I thought the three artists were related. While listening to you, there's another realization, the importance of place and space. It's a realization that I'm also in my own thinking, in my own research related to this mourning and grief processes. Again, I think Sarah mentioned it as well, how we think often of grief as a temporary state, and a lot of the psychology of grief, like the different stages of grief, or there's this dual process model of grief, where it's a cyclical thing where loss-oriented moments alternate with restoration moments. But actually, I'm more and more convinced that it's our relationship to space. And interesting enough, one of my last books that I read is this book, Grieving Brain, that recently appeared. It's summary of all the neuroscientific recent research on grief and mourning. And also in that book, what they're saying is that basically in the way that they describe the grief process or the mourning process is that it's a form of disorientation. And then in the brain, it's mainly the neurons, which are also called the prey cells, that are kind of disoriented. And then especially those prey cells that are connected to closeness and intimacy. And so there's something about, I mean, in all the practices, the connection between the human body and where we are, the earth, and the real physical space. And there's also, so that's something that might then, as an artistic practice, making this connection between them, both for ourselves, but also for the communities we work in, I think is enriching. I mean, as the four of you know, and also in the preparation, my own thinking now is really also in Performing Mourning, I was looking at these traditional laments, especially the Greek ones, but now I'm looking at gardening as, I mean, the connection between gardening and mourning and grief. And already, I mean, there's so many artists at very different places in the world who are looking at that as well. So that's just my another, like how my brain was working while listening to the representations and finding these connections. I also saw that there's a question from Thomas in the chat. Shall I read it as well? Hello, I have a question to Lena regarding her project with guided meditation, which is the image with the people lying on their back in the circle. Would you be willing to share how was the text you used for guiding the meditation connected to mourning? And if at all, how did the aspect of mourning inspire you with the text? Or how did it shape? So to tell it more about the meditation that you did in, I think it was in Berlin.
It was Eliana's project, actually. Just
yeah.
Thank you for the question. Yes. On one hand, for me, it was important in relation to this guided meditation to try to pass on a little bit of the kind of knowledge that is preserved, defended, and still shared and alive in the Amazonian area of Peru, but in general beyond the borders of the nation states. And that has to do very much with traditional healing that is mostly done through plants and through rituals that involve the knowledge that has been passed on from plants to healers that share it in the communities. And in those contexts, the illnesses, or what we understand as illness, is usually understood as some sort of disorder that enters the collectivity and that expresses symptoms in the specific body, but is not understood as an individual malady. Let's say, like from a Western experience, we would treat an illness, no? So that the treatment and generally the healing passes through this collective dimension that is very much ritualized. So in Peru, that's still very important, and I have also, because of my upbringing in Peru, being very much in touch and influenced by this approach to health and to healing and well-being. And this meditation is a text that I wrote based on some experience I had with a particular in a session with teacher plants in the rainforest. So I will put here the link, because actually after that I recorded my voice reading the text. I have done it several times with people in this type of setting, like the picture I showed. But after that, some people asked me if I had it and if I could share them for them to try it on. So I decided to record it so you can hear it, and I hope you have the chance to try it on in a quiet space. It's around 20 minutes. So it tries to convey these different ways of relating to life and to death that dissolve the borders of the individual and the collective, but also of the body, that we understand normally as enclosing ourselves, but trying to erase those limits between our physical body and what exists in other dimensions of our existence, and also disordering a bit the limits between past and present and future and time and space. And I mean, many things that now from the dimension of quantum physics, science is also approaching slowly, but that in many different traditions, like the Amerindian ones, or also in many traditions in Asia or from Africa, in many parts of the world, we have this type of knowledges and practices and ways of seeing life and death.
Thank you very much, Eliana. While we're on the topic of your project, Virtual Sanctuary for Fertilizing Mourning, I also want to ask my own questions. Actually, I'm going to be selfish and ask my own question, and I would really like everyone to chime in too. So for me, I think your project, Virtual Sanctuary for Fertilizing Mourning, acts as a kind of a communal space for sharing stories of unjust loss and of extraordinary acts of remembrance. But beyond being a kind of a symbolic tribute to the struggles led by and also the death of the environmental defenders, the project and its website, Luto Verde, exists to build community, but also to bring different communities together, whether it is the communities that are particular to South America or its communities like in Vietnam, for example, where similarly we also experience a kind of a imbalance power structures, power dynamics that are imposed on us. And similarity, I also see Sarah's project, for example, the existence of the text and the photographs as a way to kind of help us to discuss the other dimensions of what it means to care for the elderly, what it means to care for those who are in the final stages of their life. Do these politics of care exist in place for these marginalized groups? I see all of your projects with the kind of social significance, the kind of social values that they embody. But I also want to ask, beyond the kind of symbolic value of your projects, have you observed any kind of tangible societal transformations or shifts as a direct result of your project? Eliana?
Yes, I was not sure if it was addressed to everybody or to me, but I can start. I mean, this is a challenging question because, of course, I think that, as also has been mentioned by Sarah and Lena, also by Guy somehow, I think that the topics we are dealing with and the experiences we address or try to be in adjacency with are connected to very deep temporalities, no? So to be aware or to acknowledge and to ping specific or concrete outcomes, I think it's challenging because of how many of the things that we work with, but I imagine that we have experienced that led us to address these topics and to find the languages to do so, are generally things that are very subtle and that take time to find their resonances in our affects, in our bodies, in our communities. One concrete thing that I could name from my experience is that, to begin with, I continue to be somehow sure or aware of the importance of this work. Like, each step that I do in these projects puts me in contact with people that is always very sensitive and very open to trust and to share stories. So to begin with, that the fact that I had the support of these communities to be able to work with them was a big gratification. It was a huge reward for my previous type of work, and then it was then somehow I felt this entrustment of very valuable stories, and some painful ones, but then also the lived experience and cohabitation that allowed this project to exist. So there are bonds that are being built in the process, and those bonds also on one hand transform me, transform my collaborators, and in small and humble ways also have an effect in the people already of these communities. With some of them, we developed friendships, and we shared some spaces and experiences beyond the project. So that's also like an interesting result in a way that was not planned, because for us, give us access to different ways of living and of inhabiting the territory that is Peru. No, like some people from one community came to Lima, by example, to present the project in a museum. Beatriz, the woman that came, she knew the sea for the first time. She took a flight for the first time. She was the first woman that represented her community, because it's usually men, the ones that do that. So that was, by example, a tiny gesture that it was very interesting for me to be able to facilitate in that case. So those are like very small outcomes, but then when the project is presented, the responses of people are also very encouraging, and then confirming the importance of generating this type of settings to share this type of affects, because usually on one hand there is disinformation about, by example, this type of stories, but on the other hand, much people expresses their need to be able to know more, but also to approach art with this kind of sensitive disposition and attentiveness, and in a way that makes us shift our care and our attention to things that are vulnerable and that need support and company around us, so that we find our ways of engaging with these kind of topics.
Thank you, Eliana. What you just said reminds me actually of something that you wrote in your text, which was nothing disappears without touching something or someone on the way out. And you talked about this idea of sharing and creating space and holding space, and I think it also resonates with one of this idea of holding space that Guy also mentioned to me before in one of our conversation, where Guy, and you please feel free to chime in. You were saying that to make art is to hold space, right? Basically for expression, for contemplation, reflection, and debate. And also we see similarity in Sarah's project, the bravery that exists within the lives of these nuns, but also the bravery that exists in your work, Sarah, in be the willingness to share this space of extreme intimate, this sharing of one's mourning publicly. I'm actually interested, Sarah, whether you could talk about how you navigate the tension that exists between private mourning, private emotions, and the public display of such emotion, the public sharing of such emotion in your art.
Yes, of course. Thank you for asking. There is a sense of ethic that is really important for me, and I'm still looking for how to manage those emotions. But you see that there is not really like a picture of the sister themselves. It's more about the environment, the convent, and it's not portrait. It's really important for me to see that it's what I see and what I report. So it's my view of the grief, and it's not all sister like the way I see it. It's more, they are make me thinking. So like it's more a situation I'm with, and I have reflection about this situation. Also, I was wondering how to For example, you saw the images, but you didn't see the writing because it's in French and because it's too long to share for a presentation. But there is a part of fiction right now in the writing. So the first part was really about my journey in the convent and what I saw, but now it's more what is a convent today, how we can share those experiences of grief and growth, and in the garden also. So it have been real realistic and not documentary, but almost the first part. But right now it's more fiction, inspired by the religious the religious people. Also, sometimes I quote Jacqueline, which is the sister I'm really close to. I asked her, but when I use her word, first I asked her permission, but also I was looking for myself for methodology to be in kind of ethic that word. And right now I'm thinking with Robin Waltimer, which is a biologist, and our way to ask to the territory when she is fruit picking is something that I'm thinking about. Like it's a methodology for me. I apply to the voice and the word people use, and that I can or I want to use in my poetry after. What I mean is that, for example, when she's fruit picking, she asks the territory and the plant, can I fruit pick? And when she takes something, she have to give back something. So when I take word from the religious people at the convent or friends, for example, which are becoming, for example, character in the fiction I'm writing, in my methodology, I'm asking what can I give back to them. And right now I'm thinking is if sharing this story is giving back to people, because it's, I think sharing story is healing, but at the same time I'm looking for how to be thankful for the specific people and person I'm using the voice. So that's something I'm thinking. And yes, there is intimacy, but for me there is a difference between like a personal story and the secret relate to personal story, and intimacy, which is like just to write and to work really close to yourself with the experience, and the experience is transforming yourself, but it's not yourself. So for me there is a distinction over here.
Yes, please, Guy.
Thank you, Sarah, for sharing this. But I don't think it's important how you accompany the processes and ethics of care. And I've also been reflecting a lot about, as a dramaturg, my main function is to accompany other artists in their creative process. And if they're addressing this topic, how do you do that? But I want to also come back to Bill's original question about how it affects how the artistic result has itself the potential to affect. And I'm making a link to Lena's presentation. I was very happy that she mentioned in the mythological aspect of it, and she was also referencing Joseph Campbell. And in my own thinking, there's a very small book that's called Myth and the Body, and it is the transcript of a series of talks between Joseph Campbell and I forget his first name, Kellerman, who was one of the founders of somatic therapy in the States, in Berkeley. And I'm simplifying and summarizing the book, but the main message of that book is that one of the functions of art is to what they call create mythic images. And for them, what they say, a mythic image is an image that triggers, and of course, it can be in any medium. It's not just visual; it can also be sound. But the mythic image is something that triggers in the viewer a somatic transformation in the body, and that's then again, I think, why this is the element of sharing, that we start from often personal stories. We find a form to share them, and in finding that form, we make, again, there's a reflection of ethics, like Sarah said, like not to use the images of the nuns, but I mean, the sharing, the form has the potential to trigger something in the person that receives it. And it goes back also to what Sarah was saying about this notion that art should be the origin of art was a gift economy. So we receive it and we pass it on to the next person. And that's then also why I think the commercialization of art often destroys this potential. And again, when I've been accompanying my book, I've developed lecture performance where I tell also my personal story, my personal history with this topic, and I perform it with movement, with sound, with playing, and then it's my experience that every time, it's not the whole audience, but every time after I do it, there's at least a couple of people who come afterwards, and there's some testimonial about their story, and how my story triggered some understanding of deeper understanding of their own journey like that. So maybe Lena also can. I have a question of Lena, like about this beautiful shroud that she showed at the end, and also she was telling how, again, she discovered the origin only later, and then the sensibilities around it. I mean, there's another artist that I'm in contact with in Belgium. It's called Valentin Kempink. Valentin, she was one of the most successful and talented costume designers, and also designing a lot of masks for theater productions with some of the big European theater directors. Then she went through a personal mourning process herself, and now she's been again developing artistic practices or rituals to accompany other people in the mourning process. And one of these practices is to invite people to design a shroud, again, in an act of taking care of the body. But the shroud is also it's the clothes of the dead, but it's also it's the interface between, because it's what they're buried in before there was a coffin like that. So it's also this it's also there to decay together with the body, but to support that. So I'm curious if Lena has some thoughts about if the shroud is now just an object that she will cherish, or if there's some how this connects to our artistic practice, or how she wants to develop this.
It's actually they don't bury the shroud in the Thailand culture. They just cover the coffin for the funeral ceremony. So they have 3 layers of cover, and then and afterwards they reuse it. So it's passed down through the family, and different members are covered with the same cloth. And in their culture, they mostly wear black. But funeral is the most colorful. Funerals and weddings. And so so I bought this shroud, and my friend bought a red skirt, which for my ethnic group, pink looks like a New Year's color, very bright red, pink, really very colorful. But that's also used for funerals. People really wear that dress during the funeral of their mother-in-law. So it's very, for me, it's very interesting that this funeral has to be a very colorful kind of a ritual in a way. It's a celebration of the life that has lived, and also it's a pathway for the soul to move on to another life. So you're showing them all the great things in life so they can go there, which I think is so beautiful. And yes, so now I have this wonderful shroud that I'm not sure what to do yet. Like, do I hang it in the studio? do I keep it for my use later? My husband say he will cover for me. So I don't know. I bought it because on a whim, almost it's talking to me. so often I feel artists, we work with the kind of serendipity as well. We're always reading into the signs and symbols of what something means and what something means beyond the function, and something also like when so even I would say people who think they're very rational would still see patterns or try to make sense of certain connections. So I don't know, we have a word in Vietnamese called Yuan. Chinese is Yuan, so it's like a fate. So I see it as that it has come to me, and I know that I will take good care of it. I just don't know yet what I will do with it.
Thank you very much, Lena. You said something just now, which goes along the lines of mourning or the celebrating of death. Rituals should be seen as a kind of a ceremonial or kind of a celebration of life. And I also see some kind of similarity in Sarah's project, where the passing on of life is seen as something nourishing, and then on the other hand, we see in Eliana's project, this honoring of past lives is seen as something that is political, that is socially engaging. We can see that there's different variations that artistic projects or artists choose to express all of these ideas of loss and sacrifice, passing and grief. I'm also reminded of something that Sarah wrote in the text part for her projects, and I like to read it out. Art offers a welcome. Obviously, works that speak of loss are not solutions per se. It is not enough to imagine suffering or to put it into words for it to subside. Considering the inherent qualities of artistic practice exclusively through a therapeutic rationale is reductive and excludes the state of listening and communion that art opens up for those who engage with it. Art's potential for care stems precisely from the fact that art doesn't care about us. In confronting us with the realities, values, styles, forms, and lifestyles that don't correspond to our predilections, and in engaging us in an exercise of complete attention, art leads us to stop living selfishly. And I think this is just such a beautiful way to actually connect all three of your projects together. So that's just my remark. I was wondering if we have anyone in the room who has any other questions for our panelists. No, if not, well, I would like to take this opportunity to thank Guy, Eliana, Sarah, and Lena for this wonderful conversation. Guy, earlier today, just now, you said something about the human body and its relationship to space, how to situate oneself in different contexts to understand different ways of mourning, of processing loss. And the figure of the human body is also something that I see so apparent in Lena, Eliana's, and Sarah's projects. Within these projects, the human body simultaneously appears and vanishes. It is absent but never forgotten. It is called forth in many ways to inspire future actions of the living. The human body dissolves, but it also remains very much present. It is honored in many ways as it transforms from one stage of life to another. But you know, the human body in all of your projects are present, but they're not self-centered. Rather, the body is there to serve as a kind of a witness, a carer, a kind of an interface, a mediator almost between inner and outer worlds, the mundane and the sacred, bridging one community with many other communities. And I really hope that, like me, through the artistic insights and sharings, we have all been inspired to live a little less self-centric, so to speak, and a little bit more attuned to the connections that bind us, whether these connections are with those near or far, human or more than human, pleasant in the flesh, or through virtual spaces like this. Once again, I want to thank Guy, Eliana, Lena, and Sarah for this rare opportunity. And I also want to thank all of the participants for sharing time with us today. Thank you. We have finished our panel discussion here today.
Thank you, Bill, for inviting us and also for hosting this meeting like that. And my wish is to continue the exchange with all four of you, and maybe there's also other people in the room. I don't know yet, but join at some later stage.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.
everyone.
Thank you, and good night, or good morning, or enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.